attends. Non, il y a que toi, sorti.
He's set to address the General Assembly on Friday. Now, despite all of the international pressure, the international condemnation against Israel's war on Gaza, Netanyahu continues to maintain that an absolute victory can only be achieved through military means. And despite all of the carnage that has been going on, the tens of thousands of Palestinians that have been killed as a result, Netanyahu and his government remain adamant that this is the only way forward for them. Now, members of his government have been calling for some countermeasures, including annexing parts of the occupied West Bank and expanding more military operations in Gaza. And the Israeli army is doing just that. After the announcement, the Israeli military confirmed that it had deployed a third battalion to Gaza City in an effort to expand their military offensive. But despite all of the criticisms, despite all of the condemnations, Netanyahu remains adamant that he will use his political career to block the establishment of a Palestinian state. Hamda Salhout, Al Jazeera, Amman.
Well, despite the recognition of a Palestinian state and growing condemnation of the war in Gaza, the Israeli military continues to push ahead with its offensive to seize Gaza City. Its latest attacks have targeted apartment buildings and temporary shelters. At least 55 people have been killed on Sunday, most of them in the north of the Strip. Hamza Mohammed reports.
One by one, the bodies of the Daghmoush family are loaded onto a truck, killed while they were sleeping when an Israeli missile hit homes in Gaza City's Al-Sabra neighborhood. There was no warning, no evacuation order. Helpless relatives say they can hear the survivors buried alive, but under constant attack are unable to reach them.
I appeal to the whole world. Please lend us a helping hand. We're desperate to reach any of our children. Our families and relatives are buried alive. We keep hearing their screams from under the rubble, but we can't reach them. Every time we try to reach them, the Israeli drones fire upon us.
Across the city, entire bloodlines are being erased, even those yet to be born. An Israeli strike killed 4 members of the Haddad family. One of them was a pregnant mother.
We heard an explosion and we came down here to find the situation. My children were sleeping here, their mother and their unborn child in her womb. They were killed. Their father is in critical condition.
Emergency workers are overwhelmed. They accuse Israel of targeting civilians and obstructing rescue efforts.
Yet a new massacre committed by the Israeli occupation forces against unarmed innocent civilians in Gaza City. It was a deliberate, direct hit.
The Israeli army is forcing Palestinians to southern Gaza. Since August, more than 250,000 people have fled. But even after his grandchildren were killed and his home destroyed, Al-Haddad says he won't leave.
We don't have rockets or anything, and I swear we will not go south. We'll stay here, either to die or to live in this country.
For the Daghmoush family, like many before them, there will be no tomorrow. Their story, part of Gaza's growing graveyard. Hamza Mohammed, Al Jazeera.
A public memorial service is underway in Arizona for the conservative commentator Charlie Kirk. He was shot dead earlier this month while speaking at a university in Utah. President Donald Trump is expected to speak at the memorial soon, and several other high-profile Republicans, including the Vice President and the Secretary of State, are also attending. Many people arrived before dawn to secure a space in the 73,000-person venue. Let's go to John Hendren, who's inside the stadium where the memorial service has been taking place. John, so the funeral has been underway for about an hour or so. Paint a picture for us. What's the mood on the ground and the tone of the speakers we've heard from so far?
Well, this is the closest thing you can get to a state funeral without it actually being a state funeral. There is a cast of stars of the Republican Party, unlike anything outside of a Republican National Convention. They have emptied the executive offices in Washington of much of the Trump administration. Just listen to this roster of speakers. You have the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth. You have the head of the Department of Health and I'm forgetting the entire name, but it's Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And then you have the Chief of Staff of the White House, the Deputy Chief of Staff, Stephen Miller, and of course, J.D. Vance, the Vice President, all of it capped off by President Donald Trump himself, who is here in the room. He just got a bit of applause a short while ago when the cameras showed him. So this is something akin to a national rally by the Republican Party. Now, Charlie Kirk was a divisive figure. He had controversial views on things like abortion, gays, women, minorities, immigrants. But those views are not controversial here. He has united the Republican Party here behind him in his death. And there's been a kind of continual celebration. Most of the big names have yet to speak. We're expecting his wife, Erica, who took over Turning Point USA, the organization that Charlie Kirk founded. So this is one part tent revival, one part political rally, and one part celebration of life for Charlie Kirk.
And he was a polarizing figure, wasn't he, John? Just as he was popular. How are people reckoning with his legacy today, especially amongst this atmosphere, this emotionally charged atmosphere that is there at the funeral?
Charlie, I don't know my talent. I don't know my skill.
Well, here inside this event, there is, of course, unity. There were some small protester groups outside, but across the country.
Monday.com's AI blocks are a total game changer.
Excuse me if I find that hard to believe.
You know that llamas are biologically incapable of lying, right?
Does that come with knowledge?
Monday.com's AI blocks are designed to specifically help you at your work. Plus, you don't need to learn anything new.
So what? I just use it? No prompts or anything?
Let me show you how powerful it is. Sending bulk emails used to take hours. Now AI summarizes, translates, personalizes, and sends them out in seconds.
I can definitely use that.
Now you're getting it. AI can sift through hundreds of CVs, contracts, or requests, pulling all the important information instantly, making your workflows 10 times more efficient. AI can summarize calls with clients and handle the manual work that follows.
Okay, but is it good for any kind of use case?
This AI fits any type of work. Marketing, sales, HR, anything. Thousands of companies are already using Monday.com's AI blocks.
I'm finally ready to let go of my AI phobia.
I'm telling you, Monday.com, the first work platform you'll love to use.
Feels so much lighter and fresher. Wash your hands after, you filthy hooligan.
Wow, it smells like paradise in there.
Dr. Squash squashes even the filthiest odors naturally.
For Charlie Kirk. Still ahead on Al Jazeera.
This is just a joke. This is a stopgap thing.
Protesters in the Philippines come out in full force to tell their government enough is enough. Find out what's got them fired up.
Opening up the conversation.
There is a huge financial pressure for couples when it comes to marriage.
Connecting communities.
We may see a 1-minute TikTok that looks like she spent all day baking. She's beautiful, she's glamorous. We don't see the baby screaming in the background who's being looked after by the nanny.
With fresh perspectives from lesser heard voices.
Femicide is the term, but it's actually men taking their lives, and we really do need to name that.
The stream explores the key issues of our times on Al Jazeera.
I have the right to boycott anyone I want to, and the state has no business getting involved in that.
God's chosen to bless us because we protect Israel. I'm going to continue to do on a state level all that I can to support that.
A 3-part series explores the implications of U.S. anti-boycott laws for freedom of speech and First Amendment rights.
I regret not knowing more about the issue when I voted.
I'm looking forward for my day in court.
Part 2, In Court, on Al Jazeera. Hearing the facts.
Gaza's healthcare system is in a free fall, and now tents have become the lifelines. For the wounded, this is survival.
Al Jazeera's teams across the world bring you closer to the heart of the story.
You're watching Al Jazeera. A reminder of our top stories this hour. The UK, Canada, Australia and Portugal have officially recognised the state of Palestine. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has accused the countries of rewarding terrorism and says that a Palestinian state will not happen. Well, despite the recognition of Palestine, Israel is still bombing Gaza relentlessly. Attacks across the Strip have killed 55 Palestinians on Sunday, most of them in Gaza City. Israel is trying to seize the last major urban center in Gaza. Thousands of people have gathered in Glendale, Arizona for the memorial service for conservative commentator Charlie Kirk, who was shot dead earlier this month. President Donald Trump is expected to speak shortly. Palestinians in the occupied West Bank have been reacting to the news of recognition by the UK, Canada and Australia. They hope the positive words will be followed by concrete actions.
Britain's recognition, the country that issued the Balfour Declaration and helped create Israel, shows that the UK is reducing its support to Israel and finally acknowledging the historic rights of the Palestinian people.
For years, Israel has tried to prevent states from recognizing Palestine. Now more than 145 countries have done so. Other countries like Germany and Japan are considering conditional recognitions, and this is a significant change.
I hope that they would push for this recognition to become a reality on the ground. They can't just recognize the state and turn their backs on us. They have responsibilities now to support Palestinian rights of independence and work towards ending the occupation.
Today we're inching closer towards having a Palestinian state with Jerusalem as its capital. The whole world should follow the UK, Canada and France. Hopefully Germany will recognize us as well as other countries in the world.
As part of Israel's offensive in Gaza City, the military is also targeting schools that are being used as shelters for displaced Palestinians. Al Jazeera's Ibrahim Al-Khalili reports from Gaza City.
I'm here reporting from the center of Gaza City, where the Israeli forces issued new forced evacuation orders for schools block east of Gaza City, which shelters hundreds of displaced Palestinians who fled their homes in eastern parts of the Gaza Strip, like Ash-Shija'iyya, At-Tufah neighborhoods. They ended up in the streets. They are wondering what might come next in the light of the staggering escalation of attacks carried out by the Israeli military, targeting shelters, schools, residential blocks, and infrastructure. The situation is getting much more dire as these people don't have anywhere to run. And the high cost of relocating of them going to the south is very high and unaffordable for hundreds of displaced Palestinians. The situation is getting much more dire and chaotic in the light of these forced evacuation orders.
They told us we had 6 to 7 hours to evacuate the school quickly. We've been living like this for 2 years. We have no money to keep moving. We left our belongings behind and even my children. I don't know where they are or where they went. We don't know where we're going, but we're not leaving Gaza. We have nowhere else to go.
We were displaced from the schools in Al Daraj neighborhood, Gaza Girls School and Salah al-Din School. Now people are being displaced again, thrown into the streets with no shelter, no tents, not even a makeshift cover.
These systematic operations carried out by the Israeli military point to a deliberate method to force hundreds of thousands of Palestinians out from the shelter schools to head southern part of Gaza, following the Israeli military intention to seize full control of Gaza City. Ibrahim Khalili, Al Jazeera, Gaza City, Palestine.
Vote counting is underway in Guinea after a constitutional referendum, which the opposition has boycotted. Critics say it's a power grab. Despite opposition calls for a boycott, turnout in the capital has been high. 6.7 million Guineans were eligible to vote in the referendum. Earlier on Sunday, Ahmed Idris visited polling stations in Conakry.
The mood is mixed. While the opposition are insisting that they are going to stay away from the vote and have campaigned hard for people to boycott, we have seen huge turnouts at polling stations we were able to visit this morning so far, and the numbers keep increasing by the hour. What we're seeing right now, voting taking place in several locations, and in fact, voting started on time here in the capital, Guinea. And if what we see here in the capital and in the polling stations that we visited so far is what is replicated around the country, then certainly the number of people who are voting today will meet the expectations of the military because they wanted a huge voter turnout to legitimize this process. Now, the constitution itself that's being voted for has been described as progressive by some elements within the country because it provides better representation for the women voters, 30% representation for women voters, in fact, which will be a milestone here in this country. And of course, it also provides for the setting up of a Senate and of course a High Court in this country to balance power among them.
Police and protesters have faced off in the streets of Manila, demonstrations against one of the country's biggest corruption scandals in decades. An independent commission of inquiry found more than $17 billion were reportedly skimmed from public funds. Barnaby Lowe has the reaction from Manila.
Chaos on the streets of Manila. Outrage at allegations of widespread corruption in flood control projects turned violent on Sunday. Masked protesters threw rocks and glass bottles at police and set a trailer truck on fire to break through the barrier. More confrontations happened near the presidential palace before police fired tear gas and a water cannon. It has been decades since demonstrations in the Philippines have escalated like this. There's also decades of pent-up anger, even for those taking part in more peaceful rallies in other areas of the city.
This is corruption on a scale we haven't seen. The figures being spoken about are unprecedented. I mean, we call it a trillion peso march only because we're talking about trillions of pesos here and going to individuals who are outwardly corrupt, not even trying to be subtle about it.
Photos of the lavish lifestyles of children of politicians and public work contractors have been circulating online. But protesters say the worst offender is the president.
This highway was where the so-called People Power Uprising ousted the father of President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. in 1986. And on this day, more than 50 years ago, Marcos Sr. declared martial law. Protesters here say they haven't forgotten about how former President Marcos stole billions of dollars of taxpayers' money, and now they feel history is repeating itself.
The president has formed an independent committee to investigate kickbacks that allegedly run into billions of dollars. His cousin, Congressman Martin Romualdez, resigned as Speaker of the House after being accused of diverting funding for education and health. But it hasn't appeased these protesters.
They took more than that when they left the country. Come on. This is just a joke. This is a stopgap thing.
We're here for a change in system. We are tired of the system of what we call bureaucrat capitalism, where the government is being run like a business.
And to this end, they're clear. They say both President Marcos and Vice President Sara Duterte have failed to explain how they've spent so-called confidential funds, intelligence funds that are not subject to normal audits, and that these protests are purely out of love for the country, not to advocate for another political leadership. Barnaby Lowe, Al Jazeera, Manila.
Okay, that's it from me, Marlene Saeed. Weather is next. An inside story looks at the escalating conflict in Sudan. Do stay with us. Hello there. After a wet, windy and even wintry weekend for the southeast corner of Australia, there's some improvement to come this week. Yes, we've still got the winds, some rain and some snow on the mountains for Tasmania, Victoria and New South Wales, but it will improve as we go Monday into Tuesday with temperatures coming up for cities like Adelaide as well as Melbourne. Now, the temperature has already pushed up in Perth with 28 degrees Celsius there on Tuesday, so lots of heat and settled sunshine. And sunshine is the dominant feature across the north over the next few days, but with that, we have got an elevated bushfire risk. Now, the weather's not as settled when it comes to New Zealand. We've got some warmth and a pretty nice temperature there in Christchurch on Monday, but there's the heavy rain starting to pile back into the south of the South Island, and the rain is still with us across the North Island. But it's not as heavy as what we're seeing and expecting in East Asia. We've got a super typhoon that's bringing a number of risks to the south coast of China. It is expected to downgrade to typhoon status, but it pulls its way towards the south of China, bringing some very wet and windy weather to the likes of Hong Kong over the next few days. And there's going to be some very heavy rain across the north as well.
There are police here who are saying that they just want to keep the peace, but there's still a lot of anger. The people here are not afraid of tear gas. We have seen some using tear gas. That's Rwanda across the border. The commanders here say their role is to make sure that Goma is protected. This camp was supposed to be temporary. Now there are more than 200,000 Sudanese refugees.
A mosque bombed in Sudan, the latest atrocity in a conflict that's caused the world's worst humanitarian crisis, says the UN. A new US-led political initiative gets a cool response from Khartoum. What's happening in the conflict and what hopes for peace? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Tom McRae. Sudan's conflict continues to rage, causing the world's worst humanitarian crisis in just 2.5 years. Now, fighting between the Sudanese army and paramilitary rapid support forces has forced around 13 million people from their homes, almost a quarter of the population. A UN report released on Friday cites frequent war crimes, including sexual assault and ethnic violence. The UN says 40,000 people have been killed, but other estimates are higher. It also says the conflict has caused the world's worst famine in 40 years, as well as outbreaks of diseases. Various political efforts to end the violence have failed. And earlier this month, the US launched another initiative along with Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and the UAE. So what is happening in the conflict, and are there any hopes for peace? We'll discuss all of this with our guests. But first, this report from Ama Boateng.
There's no safe place for civilians in Al Fasher. Last week, the paramilitary rapid support forces carried out a drone strike on a mosque, killing more than 70 people. The city has been under siege since May last year.
We continue to receive reports of civilians being killed, abducted, or subjected to sexual violence while attempting to leave El Fasher. There are no safe exit routes out of the city, and civilians are trapped in a situation of impossible choice. Either stay in El Fasher and risk bombardment, starvation, and atrocities if the RSF overrun the city, or flee and face the risk of summary execution, sexual violence, and abduction.
It's the last remaining stronghold of the Sudanese army in the Darfur region. A recent UN report says killings of civilians have intensified and that ethnicity is increasingly a motivating factor. It found that in the first 6 months of the year, more than 3,000 civilians were killed, mostly in Darfur, by artillery shelling and drone strikes in densely populated areas. The report also found that at least 990 civilians were summarily executed. The RSF and the army have been battling for control since April 2023. The conflict has killed tens of thousands of people and forced more than 13 million from their homes. Their suffering is the result of a dispute between former allies, Army Chief and de facto head of the government Abdel Fattah al-Burhan and RSF leader Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, on how and when to integrate the paramilitary group into the armed forces. After fierce fighting earlier this year, the army said it had retaken the capital, Khartoum. In April, the RSF set up a rival administration in areas under its control, large parts of the south and most of Darfur. There have been several attempts to try to end the conflict. The latest is a joint initiative by the US, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and the United Arab Emirates. The so-called Quad group of nations proposes a 3-month humanitarian truce, followed by a permanent ceasefire and a 9-month transition to a civilian government. The government has criticized the Quad, however, saying that while it welcomes efforts to end the conflict, it would not accept interventions which it says do not respect Sudan's sovereignty and its legitimate institutions. Far from the politics, millions of people face a near daily battle for survival. The violence has brought famine to parts of the country and caused what the UN describes as the worst humanitarian crisis in the world. Amma Boateng, Al Jazeera for Inside Story.
Okay, let's bring in our guest now. Amgad Farid Eltiab is the Executive Director of the think tank Fikra for Studies and Development. He joins us from Cairo. Khulud Khair is a Sudanese political analyst and the founding director of the Confluence Advisory, a think tank formerly based in Khartoum. She joins us from New York. And Cameron Hudson is a senior associate in the Africa program at the Centre for Strategic and International Studies. He joins us from Durham in North Carolina. Thank you so much for being with us here on Inside Story. Khulud, could I begin with you? I mean, it's very clear from everything we see and hear coming out of Sudan that the civilians are paying the heaviest price here. What does daily life look like now for those that are caught in the middle of all of this? Because there really are no good options for people at the moment.
Absolutely so, unfortunately. I mean, what we're hearing from sort of partners on the ground, family, friends, civilian networks on the ground is that, almost regardless of where they are in the country, life has gotten precipitously worse. Of course, for those in places like Al Fashir, but also places like Adilinj and Kadugli in South Kordofan, famine, which has been declared there, means that life is just that much more harrowing on a daily basis. People are forced to eat, animal feed. They're forced to, spend lots and lots of money, to just get the simplest of grains and sometimes in very minimal amounts where they are available. And for those who want to, for example, flee or leave the areas that they're in, for example, chiefly in Al Fashir, there are no safe routes for people to leave. And so it becomes a very desperate situation where there are frankly no good options anywhere. But even in areas that are, for example, deemed much safer, inflation has gone through the roof. And so we're seeing food insecurity levels increase in those areas as well. And we have seen very little provision of rule of law. We see armed gangs have taken root in places like Khartoum and in the southern parts of Khartoum leading towards Jazeera. We have seen greater instability in most parts of the country, because of course, as this war continues, it mushrooms into becoming ethnic warfare, it mushrooms into becoming a fight between multifarious groups of on either side of this conflict, and it mushrooms into becoming something else entirely than what it was 2.5 years ago.
Amgad, 500 days of war, more than 500 days of war now, as we heard there, that this is mushroomed into ethnic warfare as much as anything else. How do you assess where the war is right now? Because it really just feels like it is in a stalemate with no side really making great advances at this point.
Yeah, and this is happening for a reason. The crisis in Sudan is not just conflict. It's a crisis of facts and truths. You mentioned 13 million displaced people. Those 13 million were not displaced because of a natural reason and were not displaced randomly. These people flee from the areas controlled by the Emiratis-backed RSF militia to the government-controlled areas. You also mentioned, or my colleague Khulud mentioned, the famine in Al-Dalaj and Kadugli and Al Fashir. It's not famine. It's not happening because of drought. It's happening because starvations are deliberately used as a weapon of war by the RSF, which for 18 months preventing food and aid to be delivered to Al-Fashir. It's deliberately made epistemological maze in which facts are being lost, and this is preventing the crisis of being resolved in any way. And this brings me actually to the drone attacks that took place 2 days ago by the RSF, when we saw tweets of condemnation from the UK and from the US that talks about victims who fall. Like those victims fall because of a natural disaster. Those are victims of the RSF. Those are victims of the RSF bombing a house of worship, a mosque during a prayer. What's happening in Sudan right now is blood laundering. It's not just complicity. There is an attempt to whitewash what the UAE and RSF are doing in order to reach a political settlement that includes addressing the interests of UAE and RSF at the expense of the blood of the Sudanese people. Without solving these epistemological maze and calling a spade, I think we are very far from reaching any solution for this crisis.
Okay, we'll get on to the regional players and their thoughts in just a moment. But Cameron, we heard there about this man-made famine that is obviously making everything so much worse for the Sudanese people. From Washington's perspective, why are donors cutting aid at exactly the moment that Sudan really needs it the most? Do you think it's simply about fatigue after 2.5 years of war, or do the governments actually seeing this as all of a bit of a lost cause at this point?
Well, I think there's a bigger question there about why the United States government is cutting aid, and unfortunately, I think the people of Sudan are the casualties in that, but they are not the cause of the United States cutting its aid. This was a global decision made by the Trump administration, which is having obviously deleterious effects on the people of Sudan, coming at a critical moment in the span of this war. But it's affecting other countries in different ways. But the fact of the matter is that the humanitarian appeal for Sudan has been underfunded since the day the war started, and that's not due to the United States. As a matter of fact, the United States remains, despite all of its aid cutbacks, the largest donor of humanitarian aid and humanitarian assistance to Sudan since the start of the war. But that's not saying much, because the donations from the UN and from member states have been paltry compared to other conflicts in the world today.
Development we have to bring here would be development will be one of our brothers who actually going to bring Lubama Kuma. Atani, you're already there. Atani, more already, you know. More doing your color, Atani, we na we interview kela. What video, more feka share. Nobody will say me, I not say me ka more Jamana. What video do kwa? So more feka na wole. Kumi, we don't have too much going on right now. More feka wole zwe. Beya mafene, you know. So market wole zwe la ya. I don't imagine. We'll play area for you. I learn the job on it as well. You see, I'll play. So
nene more bad in media ni actually ko itodi lo soni kone alabeta moke kaninyo male bena mobila lwa ti wata lele na mobi ko me bi mo abalonyo ya mo afekata le level gbe ala aba dia na ka fo yini mosola se kolole ta le ala kata telebi e sokono e mo bi ko ni ko ka mo wu me na fa i to fo sani mo adam na isala mu do kuma
alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin allahumma salli ala sayyidina muhammad wa ala ali sayyidina muhammad wa sallam jani ni ndafeka ye doni bao abe kri anulo abe zalika fadlullahi yutihi min yasaluna ala jale kuma kane wele amalaka kande wele ajina kande ale bugu kuma kane wele abe zalika fadlullahi yutihi min yasaluna ala kuma kane we adama de ne bulu nyamani bi ni ala tanu jangal tanga menjusulande dawla ngaka kake daraya mina ndawu daraya la
Allahu akbar
ngaka kake bulu nyamma ndawu bulu nyamma
Allahu akbar
ne do na sera jama na miye wallahi yini mo damna ne nyudo tero kasalo abe islam alugbe kabo jama na mi ma the first chairman for Yinimo the late he was General Kato Kape una everything about Alhaji Kroma mo fata Kroma kondera wole lila kafo ni alebeke leader adole the late Kato Kape ala fana ka wonita before mo na to Kroma kila Kroma frase ne kala simo broma kafa kadi yamadi fike sekundi mine fikale kafa kadi yamadi mota to slama yale makera labia so ejo ejani ikema leader Kroma la doni wonyare mo de le Jongo Jaba de Pamuya Sherry Mohamed Doumbouya the late Komba the late Ayatollah coming down to Pepe and so PYJ Mele Kundi den Fata Senaro den Komba Blackie Money will be na Yinimo Fonka Sierra Leone before more do labia kono but alhamdulillah bi mulu weta adu asiama weta ni mulu makofola adu toni kelelo banyu mulu toni jemo ma fedi alama ko be na watire alaburo
wallahi
ko be na watire tuma do ngoni lemi bawla ni bi sini ina be nyaka la so sula ni fe
Allah
ala le masale ala razina amanu wa amiru wasalihati ala mama DJ jani ya fu imandolu ye abe ngandi mando bema abe Muhammadu muna tubera aya tube watero afana kala ka botite ilala huma fo ala abe wallahi Muhammadu abe umuru de yakina ma bila yakina ma umuru Muhammadu abe Muhammadu nga mulu ma abe miru ni sira na dara na siana haya siya watero ka mine fo ala ya la ilaha illallah Muhammadu rasulullah haya mo wala ka botite ilala huma fo ala abe wala hada wala sedikara mo fana wala ka fo flana hotel la wala ala he rasulullah abe Muhammadu da rasulullah abe mo ka Muhammadu mima mo ka kira ba Muhammadu mima rasulullah ale fo ay jona robila he kata alama ale jona
Allahu akbar
ale mo ka Muhammadu mima mo Muhammadu mi akumara mo do mo rusini abe ko Muhammadu ala dene Muhammadu nyu ala ala te Muhammadu le ale fo jonere ala madam ma fa ale fo kila denere nena ka kila denere kata na lwani ya ruma
mashallah
ana wepo ya asilo abe ya usina alikuli anu aliyakimi inaka lamna limusalina
Allahu akbar
abe la ilaha illallah Muhammadu rasul
ile na mania Ili lo miti kile ne kuma chia mi. Assalamu alaikum. Ile todi. Asmana Bikwe. Kabo Bake.
Lazimana ba to ma dole. Lazimana ba Alhaji Asmana Dukle. Ne mona akabrula la masanda bowa. Ato ma dole.
Ituru malo ni koneche akanu kala. Ile na kuma kana mena masilo la ikana.
awe na ako makiringini ni katibi
Allahu Akbar.
afolo na sumu ni kafomo ai na si akabonya sumima
Aha.
ala ka kasi ni ai kulisa
ndamu ni we from bika kasi alaka kiti koko la John yakoro wallahi wole kala wallahi alaka alana kiti la koko la ni alana fu ya kafo neke to timi na mi bela jani ni adamadi nyake wallahi fo ni timi arolo ni wote ema mi lelo ni nya kala lika bufia la kafurahim inna wa bisaimana wa inao bismillahirrahmanirrahim ngamu ali yasijiri
Amen, amen.
ngamu ali yasijiri
Amen.
ngamu ali yasijiri
Amen.
muni la balo meno ni bi ala kene fana ya kalale
Amen.
muni la balo meno biju mami mandi masaba for this ala ijani jani medo ngamu amala ho maro medo kagbesa ala ho maro tusulebe laji mo wa sife la ho ma medo alo tusulebe kamo tenenge va vi la ho ma nyuma medo alo tusulebe kamo ngomo la ho ma tusulebe abakedu kata zikamo janga nyura bakene kalale alaki ya sima yale alaki ya dayale di masaba kila ho mabakala ho alawe okela
So, c'est vous. Connaissez. Nani la
Sorry, guys. That was something I was enjoying so much. And all of a sudden it went off. But trust me, our whole program, I will bring it right back. It might not be right now, maybe probably later on today. That's it tonight. I will bring it on so that we can enjoy that brother from the street of Monrovia, you know. I said that interesting, it went off. So Moi, avec un informé que les mots parce que là, quand là-bas, well, right now, we got some business schedule, so much that on your bone. So more is not my fault. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. What I not be. Coffee program that I've been on in Nare, my little Malala, inshallah. So, what's not my fault? Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
If I solo boy, not take bad mando. Didn't go to the if I solo well, not take bad mando.
If I don't kill you,
Anga crocodile.
If I solo well, not take bad mando.
And they cannot kill Lalima.
Don't kill Lanato.
If I get a cockly, I get a latte. And I get a cockly, what in the Faleno. And I get a cockly, I get a crowd, a cockly. Elacademy. What do my matter? I never will let me see Levato, Sangarema, duty didn't toilet manjang. Public Kunjang, Sangarema, duty didn't toilet manjang, Sangarema. I don't know let you don't let me go for. Only get a good routine like only get a good routine. Nigger cake, but a city like Guapilla, a Fongana get a cockly. Putting a Rebrayala. And I get a cockly, Acroman cockly, Nakura cockly, Acroman cockly, Nakura cockly, Penny.
I kill it to Lama Colino.
Minimum like I Kakasi.
In the restaurant,
I'm Master Blue. That's not low. That's everybody, yeah.